Hi, and welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I'd just take you out on a little walk. I was speaking to a friend of mine last night and he was talking about the path of life, and he sort of gave me the idea of relating going for a walk with the path of life. Here you can see the path is dug out and it's pretty straight, but the path of life is just not quite so easy. It's not quite so obvious. You don't automatically stick between the two fences. You never know when it's going to take a left turn or a right turn. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and a young man, I think he was in his 20s, was talking about his mental health and his battle with depression. And he said something that, we've heard it so many times before. If you break your arm, you take a few weeks off work, you go to the emergency room, you get it set in a cast, and everybody sort of rushes around you and doesn't expect you to lift that box and doesn't expect you to be able to go to work for at least a few days, and they understand you're in pain. But what happens when you're in pain with your mental health? What happens when the depression sets in? Nobody expects you to take time off work. Nobody gives you any sympathy. But just like breaking your arm, it's not your fault. There's nothing you can do about it. It just creeps up on you. It's very unusual for somebody to wake up in the morning and suddenly find out they have depression. It's more likely it just creeps up on you as you're going along the path of life. The way he described it was the colours in his life were slowly disappearing until eventually everything was just grey and dull and gloomy. And I think that's a really good way of expressing what happens. It just doesn't hit you like a ton of bricks until you realise how bad things are. It's more about that slow creeping feeling. I've always described it as a cloud. Sometimes you can see the cloud in the distance and it slowly gets closer and closer until you're just standing in the darkness. That's certainly how I felt with my mental health. So I thought it was really good the way he described it, about the colours fading. The joy of life, the beauty of life was disappearing day by day, and it took him a long time to realise that he was just seeing everything in grey. It's often been said, and I'm a great believer on it, getting out, going for a walk every day. My friend was saying that he has to walk his dog, which means that, although he doesn't have a set time of day when he walks his dog, it is a routine. It forces him to put his outdoor clothes on, his wet weather gear, and walk the dog. And he feels that certainly helped him have some sort of routine. And I've said that before, if you can have a routine, it definitely helps your mental health. If you've been watching the last couple of weeks, you know that I think it was 3 weeks ago now, I took you out with me on a walk in the snow, and it was beautiful. Freezing cold, -10 I think it was, but it was beautiful. It made such a difference. Get some fresh air into your lungs and get out and enjoy the day. And that's what's been lacking in my life recently, is a lack of routine. And again, the depression started creeping in. Not getting outside, not having a routine. Although I've never been one for lying in bed. I know a lot of people can. They struggle to get their head off the pillow. And I can fully sympathise with that. In my case, I can go to sleep any time of the night and I'll sleep for 4 hours and then I wake up. And no matter what I do, it doesn't matter if I spend the next hour or the next 5 hours in bed, all I do is toss and turn and doze. And when you wake up in the morning, you're feeling so tired. It's a horrible, horrible feeling. And that to me is one of the indicators that I have that my mental health is not at its best. I don't know if you can see in the picture, but there was quite bad bushfires, as we call them, out of control here last summer. I think the year before as well, but everything was burnt, everything was black, but slowly but surely it's coming back to life. And I think that's a great reminder of no matter how bad, how black, how dark, how burnt things are, given time, it comes back. You know, if you'd come here just a few days after the fire, the smell, the devastation, even the dead animals, it was so sad to see it. But look at it now. Really, without any help from human beings, it's coming back to life again, and I'm sure this summer it'll be beautiful again. That's definitely something to remember when you're suffering, when you're at your worst with your mental health, that no matter how bad things seem, no matter how black, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes, just like the day after the fire, it was really difficult to see how it could ever come back, how things could ever get better again. But it certainly has. It's a slow process, and I certainly don't think that you ever get over depression. I don't think you ever heal from depression. And that might sound a bit depressing, but I think what does happen is you learn to deal with it, you learn to cope with it, you realise what your triggers are, you see the bad times coming, and you learn coping mechanisms. You know, something simple as getting out for a walk. But I think once you recognise the signs, you're well on your road to recovery. Time's a great healer. That's quite a cheesy saying now. And I don't really like saying it, because that makes it sound like just sitting there and doing nothing, everything will get better. And it certainly won't. But if you start working on it, if you start, again, taking the tablets if that's what needed, talking to people, taking a sick day if you need to, a mental health day, looking after your mental health, you can certainly learn to manage it, to improve it, and perhaps just keep that depression hidden away somewhere. If you're always aware that it's there, it never actually goes away. But again, learning to deal with it, learning to cope with it, getting mechanisms, speaking to people, like-minded people, other people that have been through the same, educating people who've never experienced it. It is a really great healing process. This chap I was listening to this morning, he was sharing a house with his mum and his stepdad, but he got to a point, or should I say they got to a point, where they just couldn't speak to each other. The parents were just not equipped to handle with his depression and really didn't know what to do, and they started to feel like no matter what they said, they were making things worse. So they came to an agreement that they would email each other. Now that may sound a bit sad that they're sharing a house, but they're emailing each other. But you know what, if you couldn't find the words, email communication, text message communication is better than not speaking at all. They encouraged their son to put in an email how he was that day when he got out of bed. I mean, he said he was spending 16 hours a day in bed. And again, the parents really were not equipped. They did not know what to do. They did not know how to help him. So they said that this emailing technique certainly worked for them. It certainly helped them to break the ice, and eventually it forced them to communicate again. And I mean, this chap tried a few different medications and they didn't work for him, which, you know, obviously they don't work for everybody. He said he had a good GP, a very supportive GP, but slowly, surely, he found coping techniques, and one of them, and I know it's not for everybody, but one of them is his parents bought him 2 puppies and gave him the responsibility of looking after them. Why 2? 2 completely different puppies, 2 completely different personalities, and it gave him the responsibility of getting up in the morning, taking them out. Days when he couldn't even lift his head off the pillow, he knew he had the responsibility to his puppies. And it started turning his life around. It made a big difference to him. Again, it's not for everybody. I can't say it would work for everybody. You might not have the situation or the finances. But you know what? If it works, it works. Perhaps it's something you could consider. Maybe you don't need to start with a dog, maybe a fish or a cat or whatever works. There is no magic bullet. There's no one tool that fixes mental health for everybody, and all we can do is as I'm trying to do, is talk about my mental health and what worked for me and what didn't work for me, and maybe give you some ideas of what you haven't tried. So let me know down below, and let the rest of this community know, what did you try that did work or didn't work? And perhaps together we can help each other, just talking about our mental health and sharing tips and tricks. I don't know if you can see there in the distance, but the snow is still on the top of the mountains. Well, instead of you looking at my ugly mug this week, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of scenery to enjoy. So once again, remember, I always say, if you don't take the time to look after yourself, you can't look after anybody else.